My name is Nora Bennett, and I'm 66 years old. What happened here in Australia a few months ago didn't just change my life. It split it into a before and an after. The day we farewelled my husband, Russell, was the quietest day I've ever lived through. The crematorium on the edge of Newcastle felt chilly in that strange way. Grief makes everything colder, even though the sun was out and the kookaburras were carrying on in the gums. Like any other morning, I stood beside the polished timber coffin, holding white lilies so tightly the stems bruised under my fingers. Then my handbag buzzed. One short vibration, nothing dramatic, but it made my stomach drop. I pulled out my phone, expecting another apology message from a cousin who hadn't made it in time. Instead, there was an unknown number, and 4 words that stopped the air in my lungs. I'm alive. That's not me. For a second, I honestly thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. Russell had died only a week earlier in what everyone called a freak accident on the Pacific Highway. A truck had clipped his old white Hilux, they said. Wrong place, wrong time. Wet Tuesday morning. Unlucky, but believable. Yet there I was, in the chapel, staring at a text message written like it came from my dead husband. The pastor's voice faded into background noise, like a TV left on somewhere down the hall. Up the front, my daughter, Megan, dabbed her eyes with a neat black handkerchief. Careful, measured. Not a smear of mascara, out of place. My son Liam stood stiff beside her, jaw set, shoulders square, as if he were attending a meeting rather than his father's funeral. Their hugs earlier had felt polite, almost like they were performing sadness instead of feeling it. My fingers shook as I typed back, "Who is this? If this is some kind of joke, stop now." The reply came immediately. "Can't say. They're watching. Don't trust Megan and Liam." My heart thudded so loudly I couldn't hear the pastor anymore. Don't trust my own children? The 2 people I'd raised on baked beans and bulk billing GPs, carted to footy practice and school concerts, sat through tantrums and teenage sulks. I slipped the phone back into my handbag, forcing my face to stay still. My grip on the pew tightened until my knuckles ached. As the pastor talked about Russell's love of the sea and a life of honest work, my mind drifted far from the coffin, back to where everything had started. Long before the Hilux, long before the insurance people, long before I ever imagined my children could look at me like I was something in their way. I was 23 when I met Russell, in a scruffy little coastal town just north of Newcastle called Pelican Bay. Back then, it was fibro shacks and tin roofs, fishing boats, seagulls, and the smell of salt drying on the wind, not the tidy townhouses and Airbnbs you see now. I worked housekeeping at a worn-down motel on the foreshore, scrubbing shower tiles for tourists who complained about sand like they hadn't booked a beach holiday. Russ was a mechanic at a tiny workshop next to the servo, always with grease under his nails, and that gentle, shy grin of his. The first time he spoke to me, I was hauling a basket of towels up the outside stairs in a cheap Kmart dress and scuffed sandals. He stepped out from under the bonnet of a ute, wiped his hands on a rag and said, "Arvo, Nora, that old Corolla of yours sounded a bit crook going past. Want me to have a squiz at it later?" I didn't even own that Corolla outright yet, still paying it off dollar by dollar. But I nodded anyway. Truth be told, I would have invented a reason to talk to him. That one chat turned into instant coffees on plastic chairs behind the shed. Those coffees turned into walks along the break wall after his late shifts, cheap hot chips between us, sea spray on our faces. Then came whispered promises under the fairy lights in the pub's beer garden, and eventually a wedding at the surf club, with sausage rolls, potato bake, and a Woolies mud cake, because that was what we could afford. And it was enough. We started out in a weatherboard rental with a tin roof that leaked whenever it rained. We'd put out old ice cream tubs to catch the drips and shift the bed when the ceiling groaned. It was cramped, loud, and smelt faintly of Dettol and frying onions. But it was ours, and we filled it with laughter. When Megan was born, it felt as if the whole world widened. 2 years later, Liam arrived, red-faced and furious at life from the moment he took his first breath. Russ took them fishing on Sundays, taught them how to check the oil before they learned algebra, and always came home smelling of petrol and eucalyptus hand wash. We were never flash with money. Some nights, dinner was baked beans on toast and crossed fingers the electricity bill wouldn't hit that week. But we were together. We were happy. And for a long time, I truly believed that was enough. Standing there by that coffin, the phone burning like a secret in my handbag, I finally admitted a truth I'd ignored for years. Somewhere along the way, slowly, quietly, I'd started losing my children. What I didn't know yet was just how far they were willing to go, or how that one message from an unknown number would tear open every idea I'd ever had about family, loyalty, and what a son or daughter might do when money is involved. If you'd asked me 10 years ago, I would have said we were a normal Aussie family. Nothing flash, nothing fancy, just steady, just ours. Russ ran his little workshop out near the servo, a tin shed with Bennett's Auto and Marine painted across the front in letters that had faded under years of salt wind. People brought him their utes, old outboards, tinnies with dodgy wiring, and he always found a way to coax them back to life. I did whatever work came along. Casual shifts at Woolies, cleaning holiday units in summer, helping old Mrs. O'Connor with her shopping so she didn't have to drag that trolley up the hill. We weren't investors. We didn't have shares or a rental tucked away somewhere. What we had was our home, our one real thing. A weatherboard placed 2 blocks back from the beach with a sagging front veranda and a backyard big enough for a Hills hoist, a veggie patch, and the rusty frame of a trampoline the kids outgrew but never let Russ throw out. The mortgage had swallowed decades, but we'd finally paid it off. Retirement for us wasn't cruises or caravans. It was Russ tinkering in the shed and me deadheading roses, nothing more ambitious than that. Megan and Liam grew up on Vegemite toast, hand-me-down uniforms and nippers on Sunday mornings. Teachers used to tell me, "They're bright kids, Nora. You should be proud." And I was. Maybe too much. Megan was the first to want out. By year 10, she'd already decided Pelican Bay was a dead end. She wanted city lights, barista coffee, and a job where you wore heels instead of steel caps. "You don't have to do what we did," Russ told her one night over chops and mash. "But don't forget where you came from, love." She rolled her eyes. "I know, Dad. I'm not ashamed. I just don't want to spend my life stuck in some little fibro box." A little fibro box. The same house that sheltered her through storms, scraped knees, and teenage heartbreaks. Megan got into business at uni in Sydney, moved into a share house, and slowly, bit by bit, stopped calling our place home. Home became the city, my apartment, our office. Liam drifted differently. He'd always been Russ's shadow. The kid who came home smelling like petrol and salt water from hours spent helping at the shed. But after TAFE, a mate talked him into trying FIFO in WA. "Good money, Mum," he said at the airport, kissing my cheek. "I'll be able to set myself up. You'll see." At first, I was thrilled. 2 kids from a small coastal town making something of themselves. That's what I thought. Every Aussie mum quietly hopes for. But as Megan climbed the corporate ladder and Liam posted photos of nights out in Perth, the phone calls shortened, the visits stretched further apart. The little threads that held us together loosened, but I pretended not to notice. The first time Megan brought home her partner, I realized how far away she really was. Oliver worked in commercial real estate. He stepped out of his shiny car in a crisp white shirt and European shoes that disappeared straight into the patchy sand of our front yard. "Cute place," he said, eyeing the flaking paint and the mismatched outdoor chairs. "You must have bought at the right time. 2 blocks from the beach. Developers are sniffing around here like crazy. If you knocked this down and put up a few townhouses, you'd be looking at a mozza." He said it like he was talking about scrap metal, not the place our kids learn to ride bikes and slam doors during their teenage storms. It didn't take long for Megan to start speaking the same way. "Mum, honestly," she said, on one of her rare weekend visits, tapping a peeling skirting board with her shoe, "you and Dad could sell this place, buy a unit in a retirement village with a lift and a pool, and still have plenty left over." Russ leaned back in his chair, arms crossed loosely, eyes narrowing just a fraction. "We're not ready for a retirement village, love. I've still got work coming in. Your mum's got her chooks. We're fine." Megan sighed. "You two are impossible. You're sitting on something people would jump at." A few months later, Liam came home between swings. "Dad, when you can't crawl under cars anymore, what's the plan?" he asked gently. "You've got hardly any super. Wouldn't it make sense to cash out while the market's hot?" Russ's jaw tightened. I knew that look. The same one he had when someone tried to knock him down to nothing on a quote. "This old place is our super," he said. "And it's not just a block, mate. It's our life." Megan and Liam exchanged a quick look over the table. A look I noticed, but pretended to ignore. After that night, the tone shifted. Less, "How are you, Mum?" More, "Have you thought any more about selling?" It felt like somewhere along the line, we'd stopped being parents and started being a decision they needed us to make. Back then, I thought it was just the usual generational tug of war about money and security. I didn't understand, not yet, that to my children, and to the man Megan chose to share her life with, our home wasn't just a valuable block. It was the first move in a plan I couldn't see coming. A plan that would end with a coffin, a crematorium, and a text message from a dead man, telling me not to trust my own kids. The shift from gentle hints to real pressure didn't happen overnight. It slipped in slowly, the way damp finds its way into old walls. Quiet at first, then suddenly you realize something feels off. At the start, it was small things. Megan mentioning how valuable coastal blocks are becoming over a Sunday roast. Liam texting links about the property boom on the Central Coast. But bit by bit, the tone changed. Less conversation, more pushing, like we'd stepped into negotiations I'd never agreed to. And as usual, it started with Oliver. One Saturday afternoon, he showed up unannounced, his shiny black SUV crunching across our gravel like it didn't want to be there. He walked in, with a folder tucked under his arm, smelling of cologne and whatever overpriced coffee he drank in the city. "Nora, Russ," he said, placing the folder on our dining table as if it were an overdue bill. "I've run some numbers for you." Russ wiped his hands on a rag. He'd been fixing the neighbor's mower, and frowned. "What numbers?" "Your block," Oliver replied, opening glossy pages full of graphs, zoning codes, and projected profits. "If you sold to a developer now, you'd be looking at around 700 grand. Minimum. With subdivision? Maybe more." Russ glanced at me, eyebrows lifted. "That's so?" "Absolutely," Oliver said, giving the confident nod of someone who has never struggled to pay a bill in his life. "This whole strip is about to take off. Developers are desperate. Honestly, you're sitting on a mozza." I stared at the images, sleek townhouses drawn over the backyard, where our lemon tree grew, where the clothesline stood, where our kids once bounced on that old trampoline. It felt cold, clinical, like someone was redrawing our life with a ruler. "Thanks, Oliver," I said, sliding the folder back. "But we're not planning on moving." He let out a small, patient chuckle. The kind people give when they think you're being sentimental instead of sensible. "Megan's just worried about you both," he said. "You're not young anymore. What if Russ has a fall in the shed, or if you get sick?" My back stiffened. Russ's did too. We weren't fragile. We weren't helpless. We were just not what he thought a profitable life should look like. "We're fine," Russ said quietly. "But thanks." Only it didn't feel like concern. It felt like a shove wrapped in polite words. 2 weeks later, Megan called while I was pegging towels on the line. "Mum, I spoke to a planner Oliver knows," she said, clipped and busy. "He reckons your block will jump again by the end of the year, but only if you move quickly before the market cools." "I don't want to move," I said, feeling the warm sun on my shoulders. "I want to stay here." A long silence. Then a sigh that sounded more annoyed than sad. "Mum, you can't hold on to the past forever." I pressed my lips together. Any words I might have said would have come out sharper than I wanted. A few days later, Liam came home between swings. Normally, he'd flop on the couch, rummage through the fridge, and tell us stories from the mine site. This time, he walked straight in with a brochure in hand. "Have a look at this, Mum," he said, unfolding it on the bench. "Blue Haven Retirement Village, heated pool, on-site medical centre, bingo nights." I blinked at him. "You want to put us in a village?" "Not put you," he said quickly. "It'd just mean you're looked after. No mowing, no ladders, and you could sell the house, put the money away, give yourselves a cushion. We're not moving, Liam." He blew out a frustrated breath. "You and Dad are making this harder than it needs to be." Harder for who? For us? Or for the people who were suddenly very interested in the land under our feet? That night, Russ and I sat on the veranda, watching the last of the light fall behind the rooftops. Cicadas screamed in the trees. The breeze carried that salty, sweet smell of jasmine. "This is home," Russ murmured, taking my hand. "I built my life here with you. I'm not letting anyone shove us out." I leaned against him. But beneath the soft air and the fading light, something uneasy shifted inside me. Something I couldn't ignore anymore. Because for the first time, our kids didn't sound like kids. They sounded like investors. And investors don't think about family. They think about opportunity. Russ was never late. Not once in the 40-odd years I'd known him. He was one of those old-school Aussie blokes who'd turn up 10 minutes early to everything. Doctor's appointments, barbies, even funerals. So when he didn't come home by midday that Tuesday, something inside me dropped. I'd made his favourite lunch, lamb rissoles, mashed spuds and peas with a slab of butter melting through. The kettle was still warm from the cuppa I'd handed him before he left for the workshop. By 12:30, I rang his mobile, straight to voicemail. By 1 p.m, I rang again. Nothing. It wasn't like him. Even on his busiest days, he'd send a quick, running late love text. At 1:17, I remember that number like it's carved into me. The phone rang, a young woman's voice. Calm. Too calm. "Mrs. Bennett, this is emergency at John Hunter Hospital. Your husband has been involved in a car accident. You need to come in as soon as you can." For a moment, my chest locked up completely. Then the fear came rushing in, fast and cold. What happened? "Is he all right? Is he awake?" I asked. "It's best you come in," she said gently. The words every spouse dreads. My neighbour Grace drove me because my hands wouldn't stay still on the wheel. The whole trip felt blurry. Cars, horns, traffic. But all I could hear was that soft voice telling me to come in right away. When we arrived, the first thing that felt wrong was Megan and Liam standing at the reception desk. They were already there, before me, before the nurse had even hung up my call. I froze. I was the emergency contact. I hadn't called them. Grace hadn't called them. No one had. Megan hurried over and grabbed my arm with a loud sob. Too loud, too practiced. "Oh, Mum, we came as soon as we heard." "Heard from who?" I asked. Both of them stalled. Only for half a second. But I saw it. One of Dad's customers," Liam said. "Someone who drove past the crash." A lie, and not even a good one. Grace glanced at me, eyebrows raised. The kind of look women give each other when something doesn't smell right. A nurse led us into a small consultation room, painted that dull beige they used to soften bad news. She explained Russ had been brought in with severe head trauma, broken ribs, and possible internal bleeding. They were trying to stabilize him, but things looked grim. The room tilted a little. Grace steadied me. When the nurse left, the silence sat thick between us. Then Megan smoothed the front of her dress like she was preparing for a meeting. "Mum, we should talk about practical things. If Dad doesn't make it, it'll be a financial blow. You need to start thinking ahead." I stared at her. "My husband is fighting for his life, and you're talking about money?" "Mum, be reasonable," Liam began. "Reasonable?" My voice cracked. "He's not even gone." They exchanged a look. The same one I'd seen at our dinner table weeks earlier, sharp and private. An hour later, the doctor finally let me see Russ. He looked so small under the harsh hospital lights, machines breathing for him, tubes everywhere. The rhythmic beep of the monitor felt like a countdown, and I couldn't slow. I took his hand, the same hand that once held me steady on the Pelican Bay breakwall, and whispered, "I'm here, love. You hang on." For a moment, his fingers twitched around mine. Only a flicker, but it was real. The doctor brushed it off as an involuntary response. But I knew better. I knew his hands. He was trying to tell me something. By evening, Megan had spoken to 2 doctors, made several phone calls about arrangements, and had a long conversation with a staff member I didn't recognize. Liam kept asking about Russ's insurance policies and what cover he had. Not once did either of them sit beside Russ. Not once did they cry. By 10 p.m., I was alone in that dim room, the machines humming low around us. Russ's hand under my palm felt warm, but his breaths were shallow. Something wasn't adding up. Not his injuries, not the kids' behavior, not how quickly they'd arrived, not the story they'd told me. And although I couldn't see it clearly yet, this wasn't a simple highway crash. It was planned, polished, too neat to be chance. A tidy tragedy. And somewhere in the middle of it, whether I wanted to believe it or not, stood my own children. Russ passed away 3 days later. That's the polite way people say it. In reality, he slipped away while I was half dozing in an awful, vinyl chair, still holding his hand. One moment the machines were humming along. The next, the monitor let out a single long tone that froze the whole room. Nurses rushed in, someone moved me gently aside, and all I remember is calling his name over and over, hoping he'd hear me. His hand stayed warm for a moment. Then slowly, it didn't. Losing him didn't hit in one big blow. The grief moved in quietly, settling behind my ribs like something heavy that didn't know where else to sit. But the shock, that came fast, sharp. What stunned me most was how quickly Megan and Liam swung into action. Within an hour, they were already on the phone to funeral homes. By lunchtime, they'd picked a cremation package. By dinner time, the chapel was booked. They didn't ask what I thought. They didn't ask what Russ would have wanted. He didn't like fuss, Liam said, when I tried to speak. Simple is best, Mum. Except Russ wasn't even cold yet, and they were sliding forms in front of me, bits highlighted neatly like they'd prepared them in advance. They chose the flowers, they chose the casket, they even chose the urn. It's too much for you right now, Megan murmured, giving me that soft voice she uses when she's made up her mind. You rest, we'll sort things out. But the way she said sort things out made something inside me twist uncomfortably. The funeral happened quickly. Almost too quickly. Barely 3 days after he died. Half the people who cared about Russ didn't even know he was gone yet. Only a handful turned up. Me, Grace from next door, one of Russ's old fishing mates, and my 2 children standing up the front, stiff and formal, like they were attending someone else's service. No one from Pelican Bay, none of the blokes from the workshop, not a single face from his footy club. It felt small, rushed, like someone wanted it kept quiet. After the pastor finished and Liam gave a short, oddly distant eulogy, I stepped up to say goodbye. My knees wobbled. My whole world was sitting inside that polished timber box. And then, buzz. My phone vibrated in my bag, once, then again. I ignored it for a moment. Who texts during a funeral? But something in me, some deep, uneasy instinct, told me to look. I stepped aside, near the gum tree at the edge of the service area, and opened the message. An unknown number. 4 words. 4 impossible words. I'm alive. That's not me. For a heartbeat, I thought I was losing my mind. That grief had finally cracked something open. But the message didn't disappear. It sat there on the screen, clear as anything. My hands shook as I typed, "Who is this? Who are you?" The reply came back instantly. "Can't say. They're watching. Don't trust Megan and Liam." My mouth went dry. The ground seemed to tilt under my feet. I looked over at my children. Megan was checking her watch. Liam was scrolling his phone behind the little paper program. Neither looked shattered. Neither looked like someone who'd lost their dad. I clutched my handbag tighter, trying to steady myself. Don't trust my own children. The same kids I'd carried, fed, protected. The same kids who'd arranged the funeral overnight, who'd pushed so hard for us to sell the house, who'd spoken about practical decisions, even before Russ had slipped away. I slipped the phone back into my bag before anyone noticed and forced myself to rejoin them. "Mum, you all right?" Liam asked, eyebrow raised just enough to mimic concern. I studied his face, looking for the boy who once brought me wilted dandelions from the yard. But all I saw was distance, a hardness I didn't recognize. "Yes," I whispered. "I just need to go home." As we walked back to the car park, the warm summer breeze carried the sharp scent of eucalyptus. Normally it comforted me. Not that day, because somewhere between the coffin and the gum trees, something shifted inside me. A crack in the grief. And through that crack, suspicion began to seep. If Russ wasn't in that coffin, then who was? And if he was alive, really alive, why were my children acting like he wasn't? The funeral ended. But for me, that was the moment everything truly began. The moment I understood nothing about this tragedy was as simple as it seemed. I didn't sleep the night of the funeral, not even a minute. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling fan turning in slow circles, listening to the ocean thumping in the distance. My phone sat on the bedside table, and I kept glancing at it like it might start buzzing again. I'm alive. That's not me. Don't trust Megan and Liam. Those words played over and over until they no longer felt real. Just a dull ache sitting behind my eyes. By sunrise, I knew I couldn't sit still. I needed answers. Real ones. Not whatever tidy version my kids had fed me. I made a cup of tea, barely tasted it, then grabbed Russ's old keys and drove to the workshop. Pelican Bay was quiet at that hour. Kookaburras laughing in the gums, boats being towed toward the ramp. The kind of warm, salty morning that usually settled my nerves. Not that day. The moment I turned into the gravel driveway of Bennett's Auto and Marine, the hairs on my arms lifted. The shed door was sitting slightly open. Russ never left it that way. Even if he ducked to the servo for a sausage roll, he locked up. He'd been that strict ever since someone tried pinching a toolbox back in '97. My chest tightened as I pushed the door fully open. Inside, the workshop didn't look right. Too clean, too tidy, like someone had gone through it with purpose. No scattered bolts, no oily rags, no half-finished jobs, and definitely no Hilux. The same Hilux they claimed had been crumpled in a highway crash. The space felt wiped. I walked slowly across the cement floor, every step echoing louder than usual, like the shed itself was holding its breath. Then something caught the light, a small glint under the old workbench. Russ's metal lockbox. I crouched, my knees cracking the way they always did when I forgot to warm them up, and pulled it out. The combination was still the same, 0721, our anniversary. Inside were all the things Russ kept tucked away. Insurance documents, tax papers, the deed to our house, and a small envelope with my name on the front. In his handwriting. My stomach dipped. I opened it carefully. Inside was a folded sheet of yellowed notepad paper. Nora, love, if you're reading this, something's happened to me. I don't trust Megan and Liam anymore. They've been pushing too hard for us to sell, too interested in my insurance, too eager for me to slow down at work. Something doesn't feel right. Please be careful. Don't sign anything. Don't drink or eat anything. You didn't make yourself. And whatever you do, don't let them put you in one of those retirement places. I sat back on the cold floor, the letter pressed against my chest. Our own children. He'd been afraid of them, and suddenly everything made awful, horrible sense. The rushed funeral, the pressure to sell the house, the odd conversations at the hospital, the way they never seemed shocked or grieving. My phone buzzed in my hand, jolting me upright. A new message. Check the bank account. Look at the withdrawals. It started months ago. My hands went cold. If someone was trying to warn me, really warn me, I couldn't ignore it. I drove straight to the bank in town, still wearing my funeral clothes. The teller took one look at me and gently guided me into one of those small side rooms where bad news usually gets delivered. She printed the statements and slid them across the desk. My breath caught. 3 months ago, $2,000 withdrawn. 2 months ago, $5,000. Last month, $4,500, all in cash. All signed with a shaky scrawl that looked like Russ's, but wasn't. He wrote in neat block letters his whole life. That signature belonged to someone trying to imitate him. Mrs. Bennett, the teller said quietly, your husband didn't come alone for these. A younger man was with him. Said he was helping his dad with paperwork. Everything inside me sank. Liam. It had to be Liam. Before I could speak, my phone buzzed again. They pressured him. They forged things. Don't confront them yet. You're not safe. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. If Russ had sensed something was wrong, if someone was warning me, if our savings had been disappearing for months, then his so-called accident wasn't an accident at all. I walked out of the bank, clutching the statement so tightly the paper bent and crumpled. Something terrible was unfolding. Something darker and far more deliberate than I'd ever imagined my own children capable of. And as I stepped into the bright morning sun, the truth settled around me like a weight. Whatever happened to Russ was creeping closer to me too. I drove home from the bank with the windows down, hoping the warm coastal wind might settle my nerves. It didn't. The scent of eucalyptus and sea spray rushed through the car, but all I could think about were the things swirling inside my head. Russ's letter, the forged withdrawals, the warning message telling me I wasn't safe. By the time I pulled into the driveway, Megan's white Lexus was already parked out front, looking far too polished next to my old Corolla. Liam's ute arrived a couple of minutes later, gravel spitting under his tires. Neither of them had called. Neither had asked if I even wanted company. And the moment they walked through the gate, I felt it. Something tight and careful in the way they moved. Their smiles were too bright, their voices too gentle. "Mum," Megan said, giving me a hug that felt more like a formality. "We've been worried sick." "You left the funeral pretty quick," Liam added. "We wanted to check on you." Check on me, not grieve with me, not sit quietly and remember their father. Check on me. Like they were making sure I hadn't done anything inconvenient. I led them inside, though every part of me wished I'd stayed in the car. Megan sat at the dining table and opened a little white box from Marco's. "Vanilla slice," she said brightly. "Your favorite." "And I grabbed us coffees," Liam added, lifting a takeaway tray. A cold ripple went down my spine. Russ's handwriting flashed through my mind. "Don't eat or drink anything you didn't make yourself." I forced a small smile. "Oh, love, I've just had a cuppa. I'm right." Megan's expression tightened for half a second, before she smoothed it away. "Mum, you've barely eaten since Dad passed. Just try a bit." "No," I said gently but firmly. "I'm fine." The room quietened, the kind of quiet that prickles at the back of your neck. Liam cleared his throat and leaned back, fingers tapping on his knee. "Well, we actually wanted to talk about something important." Of course they did. Megan reached across the table and placed her hand over mine, her voice soft in that careful, coaxing way she used as a child when she wanted something. "Mum, we think you're not coping." I pulled my hand back slowly. What exactly is that supposed to mean? Another shared glance between them. Quick, practiced, unsettling. "You've been acting strange," Liam said. "Going through Dad's things, asking odd questions, turning up at the bank when you should be resting." My chest tightened. "How do you know I went to the bank?" Liam hesitated. Megan jumped in smoothly. "Small town, Mum. People notice." "No. Someone had tipped them off. Someone they'd spoken to ahead of time." I didn't respond, and my silence seemed to encourage her. "Mum, grief can confuse people," Megan continued. "We've been talking to someone who helps families with this kind of thing." "Who?" "Dr. Halverson," she said. "He works with older adults after trauma. He said it's common for people your age to imagine things that aren't really there." Older adults. Imagining things. The careful way she said your age stung more than I expected. "You think I'm losing my mind?" I asked quietly. "Not losing it," Liam said, trying for gentle but landing somewhere patronizing. "Just not thinking clearly. And we want to help before things get worse." Megan nodded, all soft eyes and fake concern. "We think the best thing would be for you to stay somewhere safe. A place with proper care. Somewhere you can rest." There it was. A facility. A place where they could manage everything, including my money. "No," I said simply. Megan's voice cooled a little. "You're not being reasonable." "I'm not going anywhere," I repeated. Then Liam, usually the one who tried to keep the peace, finally snapped. "This isn't up for debate, Mum. You're putting us in a really hard spot." I stood up slowly, the chair legs scraping against the floor. "So that's what this is? You want to sign me away? Take control of everything, just like you did with your father? The air in the room seemed to drop in temperature. Liam's jaw tightened. Megan's fingers curled against the table. When Megan spoke again, her voice had lost all softness. If you won't cooperate, there are legal options. We've already spoken to a solicitor. If a doctor says you're not capable of managing your affairs. A chill spread through my chest. They'd planned this, every word, every step. You won't get away with it, I whispered. Megan leaned forward slightly. We already have a statement, and witnesses who've seen your behavior. My heartbeat pounded against my ribs. They weren't bluffing. They were prepared, right down to the paperwork. Just then, buzz. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A new message. Don't let them push you. I have proof. Meet me tomorrow. You're running out of time. I slid the phone back before they noticed. Sunlight streamed through the window, bright and sharp, catching the dust in the air. Inside, something inside me shifted. A quiet, steady resolve I didn't know I still had. My children hadn't come to comfort me. They'd come to corner me. And I wasn't going to let them. I didn't recognize my own voice when I rang Pelican Bay Brews to check their opening hours that morning. Thin, tight, like it belonged to someone else. All day, my nerves felt stretched, like old washing line ready to snap. I wiped benches that were already clean, straightened photo frames twice, checked the back door 3 times. Russ's letter sat hidden in the tea tin. The bank statements were buried under the phone books. My handbag felt heavier than usual, as if the messages on my phone had physical weight. At 2:10 p.m., I locked the front door and walked down the street. The afternoon was bright and deceptively kind. Tradies' utes lined the curb. A magpie warbled from a power line. Somewhere a mower buzzed. Pelican Bay looked the same as it always had, while my whole life felt like it had shifted sideways. The bell above the cafe door jingled as I stepped inside. Pelican Bay Brews smelled of ground coffee, toasted banana bread, and the faint salt that seemed to bleed into everything near the ocean. A barista in a messy bun worked the machine. A couple of retirees shared a pot of tea by the window. A young bloke in Hivis scrolled his phone between mouthfuls of a burger. No one looked twice at me. Just another older woman coming in for a cuppa. Back booth. Far corner. Exactly as the text had said. He was already there. Early 40s in the message, I'd guessed. In person, he looked older. Mid-50s, maybe. With neat grey hair, close-cropped beard. A shirt that actually looked ironed, not flashy, not scruffy, the kind of man who could pass as a school principal, an accountant, or something more serious. He stood as I approached. "Mrs. Bennet?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I said, my mouth dry. "That's me." He gestured to the seat opposite. "Thanks for coming. I know this wasn't easy. I'm Daniel Cross." I sat slowly, keeping my handbag close. "And who exactly are you, Mr. Cross?" "A licensed private investigator," he said. "Your husband hired me 3 weeks before he was admitted to hospital." For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. "Russ? Hired you?" Daniel nodded. "He came to see me in Newcastle. Said he wasn't the paranoid type, but that something was very wrong at home. He was worried about you. And about your kids." The words hit harder than I expected. Hearing it out loud from a stranger made everything feel frighteningly real. "What did he tell you?" I whispered. Daniel slid a brown folder onto the table. It was thick and worn at the edges. The kind of folder you only ever see in news reports and crime shows. He'd noticed money going missing, Daniel said, signatures on withdrawals that didn't look quite like his, increasing pressure to sell the house, a lot of interest in his insurance, and a few attempts to get him to drink things he hadn't asked for. My stomach flipped. "Like what?" "Coffee," Daniel said simply. Tea. Special health tonics. He didn't want to believe his own children would ever harm him. But he also didn't want to be stupid. I stared at the folder. That money, I said slowly. The withdrawals at the bank. You've seen them. Yes. He opened the folder and slid a copy of the statements towards me. They weren't going into repairs or investments. They were going out as cash, then being handed on. To who? I asked. He turned another page, revealing a printed email and a grainy surveillance photo of Liam standing outside a glass office building with Oliver. Your son and your daughter's partner, Daniel said. They've been dealing with a developer. Your block is part of a planned townhouse project. Those cash withdrawals were facilitation payments. I frowned. In English, please. A bribe, he said gently. To smooth zoning approvals. Your land was step one. Heat flushed up my chest. And Russ knew? I asked. He suspected, Daniel said. We dug. We confirmed. A week later, he confronted Liam at the workshop. Liam panicked. Called Megan. After that, everything sped up. The air in the cafe felt suddenly too thick. You think they killed him? I said quietly. It wasn't a question. It was the ugly thought that had been sitting in the back of my skull since the hospital. Daniel didn't answer straight away. Instead, he pulled out a small digital recorder and placed it on the table. Before we jump there, you need to hear this. He hit play. First came the faint hum of traffic, the clink of tools, the distant squawk of a seagull. Then Liam's voice, flat, frustrated. She'll never agree to sell while he's alive. A few seconds of static. Then Megan, calm, cool, chillingly practical. Resources are wasted if we wait. The developer wants the block before Christmas. The recording clicked off. The cafe noise faded into a dull roar. My hands gripped my mug so hard the ceramic warmed under my palms. Daniel spoke softly. Your husband also authorized me to access his medical reports after he was admitted. I managed to get a copy of the toxicology screen. He opened the folder again and tapped a page covered in numbers and terms I didn't understand. Russell's injuries weren't consistent with a major collision on the Pacific Highway, he said. There was no formal police report because there was no multi-car pileup. What he did have, he pointed to one of the numbers, was elevated methanol levels. I swallowed. I don't know what that is. Methanol is found in some solvents, fuels, industrial spirits, Daniel explained. If someone ingests enough of it, it can cause blindness, organ failure, neurological damage. It can look like a sudden stroke or cardiac event, unless the doctors are specifically looking for it. My mind flicked through recent memories. The coffees Megan kept buying, the drinks Liam insisted on making, the way they always seemed so keen for Russ to sit down and relax. So you believe they poisoned him? I said hoarsely. I believe, Daniel said carefully, that your husband was being slowly compromised. And when he started pushing back, he let the sentence hang. I stared at the folder. Then why the text? I demanded suddenly. At the funeral. I'm alive. That's not me. Why would Russ send that if he was already gone? Daniel exhaled slowly and met my eyes. He didn't, he said. I did. It felt like the floor dropped a few inches beneath my chair. You pretended to be my husband? My voice came out sharper than I intended. You let me think he might still be alive. His expression tightened with something like regret. I'm sorry, Nora. I really am. But I had a reason. I'd been trying to reach you for days. Your mobile went to voicemail. Your landline rang out. When I finally got word Russ had died, I went to the hospital. Megan told staff I was a distant acquaintance and had security escort me out. Of course she did. She's been trying to contain all of this, Daniel continued. If I'd called you directly as some random private investigator, do you honestly think your kids would have let you talk to me? Or that you would have believed me over them? I hated how much sense that made. So you chose to scare me instead? I asked quietly. I chose, he said, to jolt you out of the story they were writing for you, to make you look twice at them, to stop you signing anything. And it worked. You left the funeral. You checked the workshop, the bank. You found Russ's letter. You saw the withdrawals with your own eyes. He pushed the folder towards me until it touched my hands. I filled in the gaps, he said, but you collected the first pieces yourself. That matters. I looked down at the folder, at the jagged edge of a paper sticking out the side. Why didn't you go to the police? I asked. I did, he said. Twice. Without Russ able to speak for himself, with doctors signing off on complications after suspected accident, all I had was a worried husband's suspicions and some interesting coincidences. No cop wants to be the one accusing the grieving children of murder without something rock solid. He paused. What I needed, he went on, was a legally interested party to push. Someone the police couldn't dismiss. That's you, Nora. You're not some neighbor gossiping over the fence. You're the widow. You're on the title. You're the next of kin. I sat back, feeling suddenly older than my 66 years. I'm just me, I murmured. I do Woolies shifts and help Mrs. O'Connor with her shopping. I don't know how to fight people like this. You raised two very determined kids, Daniel said gently. That didn't come from nowhere. A bitter laugh rose in my throat and died there. He continued, more practical now. Here's what we do next. We don't confront them directly. Not yet. They're already trying to paint you as unstable. If you accuse them of poisoning their father without backup, they'll only push harder to have you declared unfit. I thought of Megan's carefully rehearsed concern. Liam talking about legal avenues. The mysterious doctor I'd never met. So what then? I asked. First, we secure everything, he said. You don't sign anything. You don't agree to move. You tell the bank to flag any unusual activity on your accounts. Then we quietly request Russ's full medical file and push for an independent review of his death. And the house? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. You hold, Daniel said firmly. You tell them you need time, grief, space, whatever excuse you like. Meanwhile, I keep digging into the payments, the developer, the zoning approvals. If we can tie those withdrawals directly to Oliver and your kids, suddenly the police have a pattern they can't ignore. I looked down at my hands, older, lined, faint, grease stains, still ghosting my fingers from years of helping Russ in the shed. They were shaking. But not just from fear now, from anger. Daniel studied me for a moment. Nora, he said quietly, I know this is brutal. No one wants to believe their own children could do something like this, but Russ came to me because he trusted you to finish what he started, if anything happened to him. I swallowed hard. He wrote it in his letter, I said. He told me not to let them push me into a home. Not to sign anything. Then that's where we begin, Daniel replied. You stand your ground, I'll handle the digging. And when we have enough, we go to the police together. Outside the cafe window, the afternoon light glinted off the sea. People walked past with shopping bags and prams, living their ordinary lives, oblivious to the storm brewing over mine. I closed the folder slowly and pulled it towards me. For the first time since Russ died, my grief shifted into something sharper. Purpose. They think I'm weak, I said quietly. They think I'll roll over. Let them, Daniel said. It makes them sloppy. I slipped the folder into my handbag and stood up. All right then, I said, steadying myself. Let's see what my children are really capable of. When someone finally says no. For a moment, I couldn't find my own breath. Everything Daniel had said drifted around me like background noise. The clink of cups, the hiss of the coffee machine, chairs scratching against tiles. But none of it felt real anymore. It was as if the whole cafe had stepped a few paces back and left me sitting inside a bubble I couldn't get out of. I managed to steady myself enough to speak. "Why didn't you just call me properly? Why pretend to be Russ?" Daniel let out a tired sigh and rubbed the side of his forehead with 2 fingers. A small human gesture that told me he wasn't enjoying any of this. "Because if I'd contacted you directly, your kids would have known," he said quietly. "They've been keeping closer tabs on you than you realize. They've rung your GP twice. They've spoken to the neighbor across the street. They even booked an appointment with a solicitor to ask about having you declared unfit." A cold ripple moved down my neck. "So you thought I was in danger?" "I didn't just think it," he said. "I reckon Russ was right, and that scared him." I swallowed hard. "Then tell me everything," I whispered. "All of it. I don't want the soft version." Daniel nodded once, then settled back into his seat. When he spoke, he lowered his voice, keeping it steady and matter-of-fact. The way people do when the truth is heavy, and they're trying not to make it heavier. 3 days before Russ passed," he said, "he showed up at my office looking rattled. He'd walked in on Megan and Liam at the workshop late at night. They were standing near the bench, talking about needing things sorted before the end of the month. When they realized he'd heard them, they brushed him off. Said it was something to do with Oliver's business." He slid a piece of paper from the folder. A photocopy of Russ's handwriting from one of his spiral pads. I recognized it instantly. "Something's not right. They're pushing too hard. Insurance, house." My throat tightened. Daniel tapped the page gently. "He wrote that the same night," he continued. "A day later, Russ noticed a small bottle in Liam's bag. Clear liquid. No label. Strong chemical smell. Liam said it was a cleaner. Russ didn't buy it. He rang me. Told me he was worried someone was trying to make him sick." My stomach clenched. "What did you find?" I asked. Daniel opened another document. Enough traces of solvent in the bins at the workshop to make me properly uneasy. And Russ had been feeling dizzy after drinking coffees Liam brought him. I covered my mouth. Dear God. "I told Russ to stop drinking anything he hadn't made himself," Daniel said. "We booked him in for a full checkup in Newcastle. He passed everything. Heart fine. Neurological checks clear." Which meant whatever happened later didn't come from inside him. Daniel spoke gently. The next morning, he didn't show up for our meeting. I drove to the shed. It looked wrong. Spotless. Too organized. Cameras ripped out. The Hilux wasn't there either. I closed my eyes as memory flooded in. He left home early. Said he'd be back by midday. Daniel nodded. A truck driver's dashcam caught a white SUV pulled over on the side of the road, around 6-ish. A man was getting into the passenger seat. It wasn't a clear clip, distance, glare, but it looked a lot like Russ, and the driver, he slid a printed still across the table. A woman in sunglasses, short hair pulled back, cap tilted low. Even with the grainy image, even with half her face hidden, I felt my chest seize. "Megan," I whispered. Daniel didn't push the photo closer, didn't dramatize it. Just gave a small, sad nod. "There's another frame," he said. "Someone carrying a metal drum behind the SUV." He paused before showing it to me. A courtesy. When I finally looked, my heart sank. The shape was unmistakable. "Liam," Daniel spoke softly, as if the words themselves might hurt less if he used a gentler tone. "I can't tell you what happened inside that car, Nora. But the tire tracks we found near the old quarry road, The chemical smell in the dirt. It lines up with someone being sick there, someone disoriented. I pressed a hand to my chest. So he didn't collapse while driving, I murmured. They made it look that way. Daniel nodded once. He didn't crash on the highway. Someone put him there. And when the ambulance arrived, one of your kids called in anonymously. Afterwards, Liam signed the hospital papers and told staff not to worry you with details. My insides twisted. All that rushing, I said slowly. The funeral, the pressure, the house. They weren't grieving. They were covering their tracks. Daniel didn't add to it. He didn't need to. The truth was settling itself. After a moment, I forced myself to ask the question I'd been avoiding. Then what killed him? My voice shook. Daniel spoke carefully. He had elevated methanol levels, enough to make him confused, and then collapse. It's found in solvents, the kind tradies sometimes use. If you drink enough, it can shut things down fast. I closed my eyes as the room tilted. Then another memory cut through. The text at the funeral. I'm alive. That's not me. Daniel, I whispered. If Russ was gone, then who sent me that message? Daniel held my gaze. This time he didn't flinch or hesitate. I did. The words dropped between us like a heavy stone. You made me think he might still be alive, I said quietly. Not angry, just hurt. Why? Because they were trying to move quickly, he said. I needed you to pause, to step back, to start looking at things for yourself. If I'd called saying I was a PI Russ hired, your kids would have intercepted it, or you would have doubted me. But your husband texting you? He shook his head. That got you out of there. Much as it stung, I couldn't deny it. It had jolted me awake. I rubbed at my temples. Why didn't you go straight to the police? I did, Daniel said. Twice. But without Russ alive to talk and with a death certificate mentioning complications after a suspected accident, they had nothing solid to act on. Suspicion isn't evidence. He paused, letting the weight of everything settle. What they need, he went on softly, is someone directly tied to Russ. Someone with legal standing. Someone the police can't ignore. I realized then what he meant. You think that's me? I asked. I know it is, Daniel replied. You're his wife. You're the one on the title. You're the one they're trying to push out. That gives you more power than you think. I stared at my hands on the table. Older, worn, lined with years of life and work. I'm not built for this, I whispered. I stack shelves at Woolies. I help Mrs. O'Connor with her shopping. I'm not someone who goes after people. Nora, Daniel said gently, you're someone Russ trusted to finish what he started. He wrote that letter to you for a reason. I blinked hard, fighting the sting in my eyes. He continued, steady and practical. So this is what we do next. You don't confront them. You don't move out. You don't sign a thing. You let me keep digging into the money, the developer, the approvals. Meanwhile, you request Russ's full medical file and we push for an independent review. I nodded slowly. And the house? You hold firm, Daniel said. Tell them you need time, space, whatever feels natural. The moment they think you're folding, they'll push harder. Let them think you're still fragile. I breathed out shakily. All right. Daniel seemed to study my face for a moment. Not invading, just making sure I wasn't about to fall apart. You're not imagining any of this, he said quietly. You're not confused. You're not losing your grip. I closed the folder and pulled it into my handbag. They think I'm weak, I murmured. Daniel gave a small, grim smile. Then let them keep thinking that, he said. People get sloppy. when they underestimate you. I stood, legs a little unsteady, but back straighter than it had been in days. Outside, the afternoon sun gleamed on the footpath. People laughed, carried shopping bags, lived their ordinary little lives. Mine wasn't ordinary anymore, and as I walked out of the cafe, with Russ's folder tucked against my ribs, one truth settled deep inside me, solid and cold, but steady. My children had crossed a line, and I wasn't afraid of the fight ahead. I saw your face in my mind the whole time I rewrote this, so I kept the same beats, but tightened the logic, amped the tension just a notch, and smoothed the voice so it feels like a calm, sharp Aussie woman telling her own story. I left the cafe with Daniel's folder clamped under my arm, the afternoon heat pressing down on me like a heavy doona. The sky over Pelican Bay was that hard. Flat blue you only get in summer, but everything looked slightly off, like someone had nudged the world half a degree out of place. I walked home on autopilot, past the chemist, where Russ used to buy cheap reading glasses and crumpled crossword books, past the servo where he'd joke about gourmet sausage rolls, past the bus stop where I'd once watched Megan climb on with a duffel bag and a head full of city dreams. Every step felt like a betrayal. Of them. Of him. Of the version of our family I'd carried around in my heart for decades. By the time I reached our street, my legs were shaking. Inside the house, the air was thick and still, curtains half drawn against the heat. The place smelled faintly of floor cleaner and old roses, our life, our history, our supposed fibre box. I slid Daniel's folder under the lounge cushions, pressing it deep into the sagging foam as if I could hide the truth along with it. Then I just stood there. The cicadas screamed in the gums. A lawnmower droned somewhere 2 streets over. A dog barked itself, hoarse at nothing in particular. Normal sounds, ordinary life. And I'd just been told my children killed their father. A car door slammed outside. My heart jerked. Footsteps crunched up the path, quick and confident. "Mum, you home?" Megan. Her voice had a different edge now. Not rushed or emotional, just sharp. Efficient. Like she was here on business. I opened the front door a fraction, enough to look like I had nothing to hide. "There you are," she said, brushing past me without waiting to be invited. "You weren't answering your phone." "It must have been on silent," I replied, forcing my face into something neutral. Her eyes swept through the room, quick and calculating. They skimmed over the coffee table, the sideboard, the family photos on the walls, then slowed at the lounge. I held my breath. She didn't lift the cushions. Not yet. But I could tell she'd bookmarked the thought. "I wanted to check in," she said, shifting into her gentle, professional tone. "You look exhausted. Are you eating properly?" Before I could answer, she spotted my handbag on the kitchen counter, half unzipped. Her focus snapped to it like a magnet. Inside were the printed bank statements. Evidence. "Tea?" I blurted, stepping between her and the bench. "I'll make us a cuppa." She paused, eyes narrowing just a fraction, then smiled that soft, careful smile she used on clients and waitstaff. "That'd be lovely." I filled the kettle with shaking hands, the sound of the tap roaring in my ears. I could feel her gaze on my back, weighing up angles, timing what to say next. The air between us felt crowded with all the words we weren't saying. "You were out earlier," she said casually. "Where'd you go?" "Just for a walk," I said, staring at the kettle as if willing it to boil faster. "In this heat?" she asked lightly. I didn't answer. She didn't push. Not directly. Instead, she moved. By the time I turned, she was already at the counter, fingers closing around my handbag. "Actually, Mum, I need to check something." "Megan, don't." Too late. She had the bag open, hand rummaging deep, movements brisk and practiced. Her fingertips brushed paper. I felt the blood drain from my face. She pulled out the folded statements and smoothed them on the counter. "What's this?" My mouth went dry. I was confused about the funeral costs, I said. "I went to the bank to ask." She scanned the pages, eyes flicking over the highlighted withdrawals. "This isn't the funeral account. This is Dad's. And you've marked every large withdrawal." Her voice dropped. "Why, Mum?" "Because your father didn't sign them. Because you did. Because he was scared of you." "I just wanted to understand," I managed. She stepped closer, perfume sharp and expensive. "You're fixating on things that don't matter," she said softly. "This is exactly what we've been worried about." There it was again. The script. The narrative. The framing of me as the confused, fragile widow. "We've been talking to Dr. Halverson," she went on. "He says grief can cause paranoia, memory gaps, irrational behavior, especially in older adults." Older adults. Paranoid. My jaw clenched. "You think I'm losing my mind." "I think you need support," Megan replied, voice silky but unyielding. "Somewhere safe, somewhere with proper care." "A facility," I said flatly. "A retirement home." She didn't deny it. Before she could answer, a ute crunched up the driveway. Liam. Of course. Megan's shoulders relaxed a fraction. Backup had arrived. He strode in without knocking, giving me a quick once-over. "Hey, Mum," he said. "You all right?" "Your sister thinks I'm losing it," I said. He shot Megan a glance, then put on his concerned face, the one with the slightly furrowed brow. "We just want what's best for you," he said. "You've been doing strange things. Going to the bank, digging around Dad's workshop, accusing people of stuff. Of stealing from him?" I asked quietly. "Of pushing him to sell his home? Of rushing his funeral?" Silence. Megan slipped a stapled document out of her bag and laid it on the table like she was playing a winning card. "Enduring power of attorney," she said. "We've already filled in the details. Once you sign, we can take some of this pressure off you." Every hair on the back of my neck stood up. "No." "Mum," she said, patience thinning, "you're not thinking clearly. You could be taken advantage of." "I'm being taken advantage of," I snapped, "right now, in my own kitchen." "By my own kids," Liam exhaled sharply. "You're making this harder than it has to be." "For who?" I asked. "You? Oliver? The developer who's waiting on my block?" Their faces didn't change much. Just enough. A small tightening around Megan's mouth. A flicker in Liam's eyes. Guilt, fear, or just annoyance that I'd said it out loud. Megan straightened. "If you won't cooperate, there are legal options," she said. "We've already spoken to a solicitor. If a doctor agrees you're not capable of managing your affairs..." My phone buzzed on the table. All three of us looked at it. For a second, nobody moved. Then Megan reached for it. I was faster. I snatched it up, turning the screen towards me. A new message from Daniel. "Get out. Back door. Now." My heart slammed against my ribs. I forced a small, brittle smile. "I need the loo," I said. "All this talk about affairs is exhausting." "Mum," Megan warned. But I was already moving. Down the hall, past the bathroom, straight to the laundry. I unlocked the back door, with fingers that barely felt real. Behind me, I heard Liam say, "What's she doing?" Megan's footsteps followed, quickening. "Nora, come back here. We're not finished." She was wrong. We were finished. I yanked the door open, the hot coastal air hitting me like a slap, and stepped out into the blinding sun, heart pounding, folder hidden, phone clutched tight, knowing one thing with absolute terrifying clarity. If I stayed a second longer, I'd never walk out on my own terms again. I bolted out the back door with my heart hammering so hard it felt like it might crack a rib. The late Arvo sun hit me square in the face, bright and unforgiving, and for half a second I was sure Megan's hand would clamp around my wrist. But behind me, only the violent slam of the sliding door. Then her voice, sharp as broken glass. "Mum, get back here!" I didn't look back. I tore across the patchy lawn, past Russ's lemon tree, past the garden hose still coiled from yesterday morning, and shoved myself through the side gate. It squeaked its familiar, tattletale squeak, loud enough that I winced. But adrenaline kept me moving. My slippers slapped against the concrete as I charged down the driveway. At the bottom of the street sat a white Corolla, engine idling, indicator blinking. The passenger door flew open. "Nora, in now!" Daniel. He must have been watching the house from a few doors down, just like he'd promised. I all but fell into the seat, breath ragged, hands shaking. Daniel hit the accelerator the second the door clicked shut. Gravel spat out behind us as he reversed hard, then swung onto the street. In the rearview mirror, Liam burst out the front door. His eyes found me instantly. Wild, panicked, furious. He sprinted towards his ute. "Go!" I gasped. "Dan, go!" "I'm already going," he muttered, gripping the wheel. The Corolla surged forward. The window was cracked open, and the wind whipped through my hair, salty and warm, carrying the smell of gum leaves and distant ocean. We turned the corner, and my house vanished behind the tree line. Only then did my lungs finally take a proper breath. Daniel kept his eyes on the road. "You all right?" "No," I whispered. "But I'm not in their house anymore." "That's a start." We drove in silence for a few minutes, the hum of the highway settling around us like a thin blanket. Underneath the fear, something else flickered. Disbelief, grief, a hollow ache settling in my chest. Finally, I spoke. "They had the forms, enduring power of attorney. They were going to force me to sign." Daniel's jaw tightened. "They've escalated, faster than I expected." He tapped the folder on the console, the second copy of everything he'd shown me at the cafe. "We go straight to Newcastle Police. We give them all of it, before your kids start damage control." I stared out the window. Power poles flashed past, shadows stretching long in the late light. My reflection in the glass looked like someone I barely recognized. Hair wild, cheeks drained, eyes raw and shocked. "I still don't understand how they could do this," I said quietly. "My own children." Daniel didn't soften his tone. He didn't need to. "Greed corrupts quicker than people think. Your land is worth a fortune. Add the insurance payout, the chance to take control of your assets. They saw opportunity. An opportunity can turn even good people dangerous." "Then they're not good," I murmured. He didn't disagree. By the time we reached the Newcastle police station, the sky had dipped into a burnt amber glow. Cicadas were tuning up in the trees, loud enough to rattle the windows as Daniel pulled into the staff car park. "Less foot traffic," he explained. "Safer." Inside, the fluorescent lights felt harsh, clinical, like they were stripping away the last bit of denial I'd been clinging to. The duty sergeant looked up from his desk. "Evening, how can I—" He stopped mid-sentence. "Cross? Again?" Daniel placed the folder on the counter and slid it forward. "It's murder." The sergeant's eyebrows shot up. "Whose?" "Russell Bennett. Poisoning. Staged as a medical collapse." Daniel set a USB drive on top of the folder. "And there's an ongoing attempt to harm his wife." The sergeant swore under his breath, then called 2 officers over. They ushered us into a private interview room. What followed felt like ripping open old wounds using bare hands. For 2 straight hours, I told them everything. The pressure to sell, The sudden interest in our finances, the forged signatures, the staged accident, the coffee they tried to push on me, their attempts to have me declared mentally unfit. Daniel filled the gaps with evidence, recordings, documents, photographs, timelines. At one point, the sergeant stopped writing. He looked at me with something close to heartbreak. "Mrs. Bennett, I'm truly sorry. This is one of the worst familial coercion cases I've seen." Familial coercion. The words were too tidy for something so ugly. When we finally finished, darkness had settled outside. The sergeant shut his notebook and exhaled. "We'll issue warrants tonight, arrests at first light." A shiver ran through me. "They'll come looking for me," I said. "They know I ran." Daniel rested a hand on my arm. Steady, warm, grounding. "That's why you're not going home." "Then where do I go?" "A safe house," he said. "You'll stay under my watch until this is over." The sergeant nodded. "You're under police protection from this point on." I closed my eyes. I could feel my whole life sliding sideways. My home, my memories, my children, everything I'd spent years tending like a garden suddenly uprooted. But then I pictured Russ, his quiet strength, his rough hands, the note he'd left me, the trust he'd placed in me to survive this. And something inside me hardened, quietly, fiercely, like steel cooling into shape. I opened my eyes. "All right," I said. "Let's finish what they started." Tomorrow the police would make their move. Tomorrow the truth would finally see daylight. And tomorrow, Russ would get the justice he deserved. 5 years have passed since the day the police took Liam and Megan away in handcuffs. 5 years since the Newcastle local court echoed with their own voices, plotting to harm the man I loved and me. 5 years since I stood in the witness box, hands trembling, yet somehow stronger than I'd ever been. And still, I'm here. The kookaburras laugh at dawn, just like they always have. The sea breeze rolls over Pelican Bay, slow and constant, carrying salt and stories in the air. Life goes on, even after it breaks you in ways you didn't think possible. My little fibro house is still mine. No glossy retirement village, no early inheritance, no power of attorney trap. Just a modest home with creaky floors, stubborn geraniums in the front yard, and the ghost of Russ's laughter lingering under the old lemon tree. After the trial, the town looked at me differently. The woman whose own children tried to kill her. Some whispered in Woolies. Some hugged me too long at church. Some left scones at my doorstep with no note, but gradually that attention faded. Now I'm simply Nora, the woman who fills her own petrol on Tuesdays for the cheaper price, who always carries a spare $2 coin for the trolley. What changed most wasn't the town, it was me. I used to be quiet, soft-spoken, the kind of mum who apologized too much at parent-teacher interviews, who felt guilty resting while chores remained undone. Grief reforges people. Betrayal tempers them like steel, not cold or brittle, but warm, strong, unbreakable. The Ernest Bennett Community Trust operates out of an old op shop near the post office. We painted it a gentle gum leaf green, the colour Russ always said suited the Australian bush best. Inside, volunteers make coffee for people who've lived through family financial abuse, coercion, elder exploitation, the kinds of stories Aussies often keep behind closed doors. Some days it feels like half the Hunter region has a story to tell. Sons forging signatures, daughters siphoning bank accounts, neighbours witnessing too late. It's heartbreaking, but it's also why the trust matters. Daniel Cross, still steady as ever, handles most of the investigative work. Not romantic, not complicated, just a presence that feels safe. We meet for Wednesday lunch at the Pelican Bay Cafe on the foreshore. He always orders the chicken schnitty. I always steal a few of his chips. A small routine, a touch of normalcy. As for Megan and Liam, life hasn't been gentle. Liam is in a corrective services psychiatric unit. Doctors say he cycles between guilt and denial so violently he can't mix with the general prison population. He sends me letters, messy, rambling, apologies tangled with half-remembered dreams. I read a few, then I stopped. Some wounds heal only if left alone. Megan didn't last long in prison either. An overdose she'd been preparing over months left her unconscious. She survived, but she was never the same. Her release hearing was denied last year. The parole board saw through the tears she tried to weaponize. Greed doesn't release its grip easily. I don't wish her harm, but I don't wish her freedom. Some truths are best left in the hands of justice. Every Sunday, I walk to the water with a thermos of tea and sit on the rocks where Russ used to fish. I talk to him, not with words, but with the quiet, familiar presence that still fills the air when the tide rolls in. See, I whisper in my heart, I kept us safe. I kept your house. I honored your warning. Sometimes, when the breeze shifts just right, I swear I feel him beside me. Warm as a hand on my shoulder, proud as ever. People ask if I miss my children. I do. But not the ones they became. I miss who they used to be. Love isn't measured by blood. It's measured by protection, by loyalty, by action. My story isn't tragedy anymore. It's survival. It's discovering courage when the people you trusted most become the danger you never saw coming. It's realizing that even at 66, even at 71, even with a heart cracked open, you can choose peace. You can choose yourself. So if you're listening from somewhere across Australia, Sydney, Perth, Darwin, a tiny town tucked between gum trees and red dirt, leave me a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. And if my story speaks to you, support me with a super thanks, so I can keep sharing real-life stories just like this. On the screen, you'll see 2 more true Aussie stories I know you'll love. There's plenty more waiting for you. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you in the next life story.